Well, good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. My name is Matthew Smith, serve as Vice President of Strategic Partnerships and Development with Sudan Relief Fund. And I want to thank all of you who have joined so far here for this afternoon to hear a little bit of a discussion, a presentation, and also hopefully a conversation with you all about Sudan Relief Fund's work in South Sudan and Sudan, as well as my recent trip to about 8 different project locations over the course of about a month in the month of May. And so I'm here to present to you all some of the projects and initiatives that Sudan Relief Fund is undertaking, thanks in large part to our partners and donors such as yourself. And ultimately, I hope you're encouraged by some of the projects and locations that I'm presenting to you all today. Now, how this will work is I'm planning on presenting about 35 to 40 minutes worth of photos and stories about my recent trip. And while I'm doing so, I hope that if you have questions, you'll either write them down or you can even put them in the chat. And that's where I'll be looking at here over the course of my presentation. And then at the end, I'll also look at the chat and answer any questions that you might have. So hopefully you all have access to that chat here. I have it here up, and I'll be looking at it over the course of the presentation. And we'll allot about 15 minutes at the end for any questions that you might have. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully, everyone will be able to see it. If anybody has issues or you can't see it for whatever reason, just drop a note in the chat. But I'm going to share my screen, and you'll see a PowerPoint here. So as I said, I was in South Sudan for about 3 weeks, almost close to a month. And in my time there, I went to most of the locations that you'll see here on this map, actually. I went started here in Juba, traveled to Malakal, Rumbek, Yambio, all throughout Western Equatoria, the Nuba Mountains, and also Wow here as well. And to start, you might have heard over the last month or so about the civil war in North Sudan. And we were curious as to how that would affect our journey and our trip and the projects that we'd be able to see. Of course, South Sudan itself is not safe, but we wanted to be conscious of the fact that, with civil war in the north, how that might affect our journey and travels around in the south. We were able to get into the country, myself, David DeToni, our director of operations, and our program director, Fred Otinho, and we landed here in Juba, the capital city. Upon arrival in Juba, our first day, we had a meeting with the Bishop of the Diocese of Malakal, Bishop Stephen. And you might see here on the map, this red dot at the top, near the border of South Sudan and North Sudan. This is where Malakal is located. And we had a conversation with Stephen on our first day that we arrived about how the war in North Sudan was affecting his diocese here in Malakal and how Sudan Relief Fund might be able to help. And he told us that he's being flooded with refugees and returnees coming from the north. And I was stunned because I know that Malakal and South Sudan as a whole are already not a safe place. It lacks many resources that you and I take for granted. And so the idea that people are traveling from North Sudan into South Sudan for their safety seemed remarkable to me, that someone would leave Khartoum and North Sudan to come to a place like South Sudan where there's already so little. And nevertheless, he said that he had many, many people coming into his diocese that were needing some sort of refuge. And so we said, okay, was not on our original itinerary, but we wanted to go to Malakal to assess the situation with the refugees. As you can see here from this photo, this gives you just one illustration of the desperation that many of the people in North Sudan are facing right now. This is a boat that was being ferried by the Diocese of Malakal to help bring people from North Sudan into South Sudan. Now you can see, it's jam-packed with people. And again, the idea that they would be fleeing into South Sudan, where as you'll see in some of these photos, there is very little, is itself remarkable. here you get a sense of what life is like in Malakal. Here's Bishop Stephen in this photo, and he was showing us where a bomb recently, about a year and a half ago, went through his church. And this is the bomb hole right here. And so Malakal itself is functionally still a war zone. And so you have desperate people fleeing one war zone in the north, just trying to escape into what's functionally another war zone in the south. And so, again, this is another photo that just illustrates there's very little infrastructure. There's very little residence either in Malakal. I mean, the people there are not in their homes because it's so unsafe. And so they actually almost all live in a protected UN camp under armed guard. And so these refugees are showing up to a situation here in Malakal that's pretty tenuous itself. And this is where we greeted them. Underneath the trees on the banks of the Nile River, there was a couple hundred refugees that had arrived the day before we got there. And we were able to speak with them, to greet them. And as you can see, this is all they have. There's no shelter. There's no clean water. It's just a group of people who have tried to escape an active war zone, and they've come here on the banks of the Nile with nothing except what they could carry. Some of them are occupying the empty homes, the abandoned buildings back here, and that's a temporary refuge for some, but many are just out residing underneath the tree in the heat. And we asked Bishop Stephen, how can we provide emergency support to you to help your diocese meet this need? And he asked us to provide some tents and tarps for shelter. And so we were able to do that. And we actually brought about 3 tons worth of shelter and tents, temporary tarps, I guess, with us. We were able to provide those to the people. We've also pledged support to allow him to continue to run the boat that you saw a few photos ago back and forth to the border. Costs a lot of fuel, as you might imagine. And so we're working with the bishop there to make sure that he's able to continue to do so, to bring these victims of war to at least a somewhat safer conditions. This here was Martha, and she told me that she traveled 5 days by foot and by boat from Khartoum, the capital of North Sudan, to the border and then to Malakal. And, as I heard her story and as I spoke with her, I was astounded by her courage. And yet here she is with a smile on her face. Ultimately, she was just happy to be somewhere where there weren't bullets flying, even if it was in a place like Malakal, which is itself, very desperate for any sort of resources. Again, just some photos as I walked around the camp here. And yet, despite the terrible and harsh conditions, the kids still found ways to have fun here, bathing in the Nile, washing clothes in the Nile as well. And so that was our time in Malakal. It was illuminating to see the conditions with which many of these people are forced to live in. And again, they didn't choose to be here in Malakal. In fact, many of these folks who you've seen in these photos are South Sudanese themselves. And they originally went to North Sudan because it was safer than the South. And now they're being forced to return back. And so it's this back and forth displacement and violence that's just daily life for so many in this part of the world. And at the tail end of our time, this is me here, and I was actually able to hand out some food that we had also brought. Not nearly enough for all the people there that you saw, but at least something to get them started. And that was just one day of our 3-week or so journey. And so you can tell, we packed a lot in. And so that was just day 1 in Malakal. And so we're going to be continuing to work with the bishop there as pledging our support to help with the work that he's doing with these refugees and returnees. Our next stop was here in the middle of this map in Rumbek, which is right in the middle of central Equatoria, South Sudan. And in Rumbek, we had the incredible opportunity to visit with the Missionaries of Charity. You may recognize their habits. They are the order founded by Mother Teresa. And they are such an incredible example of the poor serving the poor. And these women have given up any earthly comforts, pledged a life of poverty, and are serving a group of orphans here in Rumbek, where outside the sisters, these poor orphans would have no support. They would have nowhere to go. This is the only orphanage in all of Rumbek. And you can see here, this is Sister Clarice and Sister Claudette, and this is one of the midwives as well. And this building behind them is actually a new building that, thanks to Sudan Relief Fund supporters such as yourself, we're actually in the middle of building. And I was so happy to be able to see it firsthand, get a sense of the size and the good that it's going to do. These sisters serve about 53 orphans. And in addition, there's also about 40 or so young girls, many of whom are 12, 13 years old. Oftentimes, they're the aunts of the orphans. So maybe the orphan baby's mother died in childbirth. And so a young 12-year-old aunt is taking care of their niece or nephew, but as they're only a child themselves. And so they have sought help from the sisters. This story was so impactful to hear about the ways in which some of these orphans are found. These two babies right here, this is inside the orphanage. The one on the left and the one on the right here were both found by the sisters at the garbage, the dump nearby. And in fact, this one in the striped pajamas here was found the morning that I was there visiting. The sisters said no more than 2 hours before I had shown up that they had found this poor little baby abandoned by his family at the dump. And this is a midwife here who's helping take care of both of them. And that's the story for so many of these poor children here. And outside of the sisters who are giving them a loving home and support, they would have nowhere to go. And so you see faces like this across the orphanage, and like I said here, even in the back, young girls as well. Oftentimes, they're the aunts of the babies that are at the orphanage. This young girl here holding the baby is her aunt. This young child was a twin, and her twin brother died, and her mother also died in childbirth. South Sudan has one of the highest maternal mortality rates. And so she may be no more than 13 or 14 years old herself, and she came with her niece to the Missionaries of Charity Orphanage to seek some sort of support because she certainly could not care for her on her own. And here is Sister Clarice with some of the midwives and some of the children as well. And so Sudan Relief Fund provides recurrent support for all of the needs of this orphanage year over year. And in addition, as you saw a few photos ago, we also are engaged in a number of capital projects in Rumbek, including that large multi-purpose hall, which will allow the sisters more space. Here is David Detoni on the left, who is Sudan Relief Fund's Director of Operations, and myself on the right, in front of the very meager sign that the sisters have put outside of the orphanage. And as you can see, they have a sturdy wall here, and we're also actually helping them construct a wall in the back of their property as well, just to ensure further safety for the sisters and the children. We were also able to visit with Bishop Christian Carlassier here in the middle in the green polo shirt. On the left is actually Frederick Atinho, Sudan Relief Fund's project coordinator. And Bishop Christian is the Bishop of Rumbek, and some of you may be familiar with his story. I find continued inspiration in his story. He's one of the youngest Italians ever to be appointed bishop of anywhere, and he was appointed bishop of Rumbek 2 years ago. And there was an attempt on his life shortly after his appointment, and someone shot him multiple times in his home, in his legs and torso. He survived. He recovered, and he's back serving. And he's an incredibly hard worker and a passionate person who cares a lot about his diocese and the people of Rumbek, and he's a key partner of Sudan Relief Funds. We also had the opportunity in Rumbek to visit a leper colony where we have been working at for a number of years. This is a leper colony that Sudan Relief Fund has helped from the very beginning. From its inception, we helped provide a medicine there, clean water, food, emergency resources. We've also built a small maternity clinic, a health clinic as well. And I had the opportunity to go again this year. I went last year as well in 2022, and it was such a delight to be able to arrive to the leper colony and see familiar faces, people that are recovering, that have had their conditions treated, and that recognized me even from last year when I visited. And so it was a real joyous occasion to be able to visit this leper colony and see the faces that I had seen last year, and some new faces as well. And again, despite the harsh conditions, you still see smiles, which is, convicting for me as someone who can fall into habits of complaining or feeling disgruntled with what I have. It's incredible to see still the smiles and gratitude of those who have so little. And here's a clean water well. You can see here in the leper colony pumping out wonderful clear water, which is they do not take for granted in this part of the world. And you'll see some more photos about that here pretty soon. And so from Rumbek, our next location that we went to was we went west to Western Equatoria in South Sudan. And we traveled, as you'll see, many dots here. This is where all project locations where Sudan Relief Fund is involved in. And we hit almost every single one of these dots. And so we had a lot of things to see and to do, but we were able to accomplish all of it over the course of a couple of days in Western Equatoria. Our first stop was in Tambra, which is this green dot. I hope you're able to see my pointer here. It's this green dot here in Tambra. And there we met with Father Avelino Basoles and Father Albert, two Spanish priests who have been working in Western Equatoria, South Sudan for a number of years and are strong partners of Sudan Relief Fund. And as we were driving to their parish, Ave Maria Parish, we were stopped by a couple of villagers on the side of the road who flagged us down. And as we were driving, Father Albert pulled the car over. He said, "I want you to see something. These people have something to tell us." And he pulled out this water bottle that looked to me like mud. And this villager approached us with this bottle, and he presented it to us, and he said, "This is what we are drinking here in this community." And my jaw nearly hit the floor. I thought, there's no way that this mud is what they have to drink. They don't have any clean water, and this is what they are forced to try to get some sort of hydration from. And so Father Albert is here showing us, and he actually poured it out, and you could see the cloudiness and the darkness of the water, if you could call it that. And Father Albert, implored us. He said, "We would love to do a number of clean water initiatives in this part of Tambra. You can see the desperation here and the need for the water. And so we would love to be able to put more water points that are accessible to people in these villages in Tambra." And so we're going to be working with Father Albert and Ave Maria Parish over the coming year to instill a number of different water points in this part of the country to help meet this need. This here is the St. Peter's Health Clinic, and you can see some members of our team here. David Dottoni, Director of Operations, who you saw a little bit ago here in the blue. Frederick Atinho here in the checkered shirt. This is Father Avelino Basoles in the yellow soccer jersey here. And we had an opportunity to visit this clinic, which serves a population of thousands of people. It's probably the only notable health clinic for dozens and dozens of miles. And what Avelino told us was that people will walk days to get here just to get basic treatment. And what was incredible to hear was for their entire yearly budget for this health clinic, which again serves thousands of people, it's only $60,000 for the year, which was another moment of illumination for me, where I stopped and thought, wow, what you can do for so little in this part of the world, where you can be the sole health clinic for thousands of people for $60,000, which would be certainly unheard of here in the US. And at St. Peter's Health Clinic, I was so happy to see, well-stocked shelves full of medicine that is going out the door very quickly. And so there's certainly still a need for funding and for more medicine, but it is being used, and the people there are being served. And so Sudan Relief Fund is going to be providing, again, the medicine and costs associated with running the clinic for the coming year. And so we're so happy to be working at this clinic. It's because otherwise in this part of Western Equatoria, there really is nowhere to go for a lot of these people. And these are some of the people that you see. It was hard to be confronted with some of the incredible diseases and injuries that you see that, again, it's just daily life here in South Sudan. This poor boy had a seizure and had fallen into a fire and had incredibly bad burns and was being treated. But if St. Peter's Health Clinic was not here, I don't know where this boy would go. And so it is, again, a reminder of how important just a small clinic like this can be for so many people. In addition, one of the more incredible things happening in Ave Maria Parish in Tambora is this vocational training center. And the man you see here with his saw is actually a refugee himself. So many have been displaced around the country of South Sudan and have forced to seek refuge in places that aren't their home. And this man is one of them. About a year and a half ago, significant fighting broke out in the areas around Tambora, and thousands of people had to flee and came to Ave Maria Parish. And this man was one of them. And here in the middle of the jungle, it's extremely remote, it's hours and hours and hours of driving through jungle to get here. Father Avellino, Father Albert are teaching these men and women how to be carpenters, how to work with their hands, developing life training skills, vocational skills. And it's remarkable to see. And this is actually mahogany wood, which is a wood that is local to South Sudan, this part of South Sudan. And they make incredibly beautiful chairs and wooden crosses, which they presented us with as well. So it was wonderful to see the work happening at this vocational training center. Again, in the middle of the jungle, men and women are being taught incredible skills. And this is the camp, the refugee camp for internally displaced people, and where that man has resided for the last year and a half, and so many others have been forced to live as well. And this is the church in Ave Maria, which is a remarkable structure. Again, we're in the middle of the jungle here trying to set the scene. And in the middle of the jungle, you've got this massive church, which was built by the people here in Tambora and using local mud to create this clay. And it's an incredible structure that the people are so proud of. It's been around, it was originally built by Spanish missionaries in the 1800s and went through it was pretty downtrodden for a while. And so the people underwent an extensive renovation and is reopened now. And it's just a beautiful structure. And here is Father Avellino inside of the church. And of course, he's very proud of it. And so from there, we went to Yambio this way, to the green dot down here. And in Yambio, I had one of the highlights of the trip, for me at least, was being able to attend the grand opening of a new clean drinking water borehole. And this was, I actually got to go and cut the ribbon myself on this new borehole that Sudan Relief Fund installed earlier this year in 2023. And it was an incredible moment for me to be able to see just the celebration and the excitement around something as simple as clean water. And you can see just the smiling faces as we came in to open up this borehole. And here's myself actually getting ready to cut the ribbon of this borehole. And I tell you, they were celebrating, this like it was like their sports team had just, won a championship or something. It was song and dance and just an extended hours-long celebration just over the fact that, hey, now we have clean water in our village. And this here is the Vicar General of the Catholic Diocese of Tambora-Yambio, who blessed the well. And then I had the opportunity to cut the ribbon and actually be the first person to pump some of the water out of it. And then the party was on. It was everybody getting a turn, filling up their jerry can with this new source of clean water. And it was just such an exciting opportunity. And when life is so harsh and life, and you're wanting for so much, something as simple as clean water in your village is a cause for celebration. And here's the kids and one of the priests as well gathered around extremely excited about this. Our next stop here was nearby Remenze at the Our Lady of Assumption Primary School, which is a primary school right now that has over 1,000 students. Sudan Relief Fund has built 2 classroom blocks there, and we are currently in discussions of building a secondary school there as well to allow it to expand its capacity even more. And this school is run by a group of Ugandan brothers, the Brothers of Christian Instruction, and they're doing such incredible work. And these children come from all across Western Equatoria. It is known as the standard for primary school in this area. And many parents send their children here as a boarding school as well, because they know if they're at Our Lady of Assumption Primary School, they're going to be getting a good education. And this building is actually one that is almost complete, as you can see. This is a new multi-purpose hall that Sudan Relief Fund has funded and is currently constructing. They're actually using it. They're so excited about this new building. They're actually already using it, even though the floors aren't done yet, and there still is some work to be done here on the outside. But the school is so crowded and there's so many kids that they're using it as an overflow for where they eat their meals at lunch. And so it was cool to see it already in use. Just everybody, it was so excited to have this new building. And as I said, we're also going to be partnering with them in the future, building a new secondary school there as well. I also got to swing by Bishop Abengite High School in Yambio, where you've got some of I think the future leaders of South Sudan. Now, we saw the primary school there just 2 slides ago, and here is a high school, and the secondary school here is home to, I believe this was just the class of senior 4. So I believe there's about 500 or so students, and it's known as, again, as the standard in this part of South Sudan, the best school. And we talked to so many of them saying, what are your dreams and aspirations? And they have big hopes and big dreams, and it's all made possible because of their education that they're getting here. Some wanted to come to the US to go to university. Some wanted to go to Canada, although I had to tell them, do you know how cold it is there in Canada? Some wanted to go to Uganda for university. Some wanted to be doctors, lawyers, and so on. And so it was just so cool to hear from them directly, what their dreams are and how that's been made possible through this education. And Sudan Relief Fund has built 2 classroom blocks there out of the 3, and one of which was completed in 2021. And we're also going to be doing a clean water project here as well, building a new water point for the students in the school here. In Yambio as well, I had the opportunity to go to the Star Support Group in Yambio. And this is a group that serves women and also children that are afflicted with HIV and AIDS, providing them support, medicine, as well as job skills training. And so you can see so many of the women learning how to sew. And again, that's just another area of life skills training that we think is so important. As we look towards the future of South Sudan, of course, so much of life there is just about getting the basics met, food, water, shelter. But when we look towards the future of this country, we also want to be sure that people are getting education that will serve them down the road, that they're getting life skills training as well, that will enable them to have a career moving forward. And so we want to meet the basics, but we also want to set people up for success. And so that was our time in Western Equatoria, which I'm covering briefly, but hopefully you all get a sense of the good work that you're helping support here in South Sudan. Our next location that we went to was in Wau, which is right here, kind of northwest of the country. And in Wau, excuse me, I'm sorry. We also, I shouldn't neglect the fact that we were first in Zara. And in Nzara, I was able to see Sister Bianca and her orphanage, the St. Paquita Orphanage, which is an orphanage that we've been supporting now for many years. This is just so you all can see on the map here one more time, so I don't neglect to show you where we are. This is also here in Western Equatoria, here in Nzara. Sister Bianca herself is probably 80, 81 years old, and she's been selflessly serving orphans in Western Equatoria for all of her life, she says. And again, these are children that would have no other place to go, no other place to turn if not for her. And we had been partnering with her for many years in Tombra, but the situation, I think, as I mentioned maybe earlier in this presentation, there was violence there about a little bit ago, and we weren't exactly sure if it was still safe for her there. And so we wanted to just, out of abundance of caution, move her to a new location. And so currently we are constructing a new orphanage in Nzara for the children. They're in a safe temporary place right now in Nzara, and the orphanage that is newly constructed is going to be finished in the next couple of months, and we're so excited. And of course, it's just going up right now, so there's no finished product or close to finished product yet. But according to the contractor there who's helping us build it, he said he expects it to be done hopefully by September of this year. So they're working hard to make sure that these children have a new building that is going to be safe and secure for all of them. And here's another photo of one of the buildings. It'll be two buildings, a girls' dorm and a boys' dorm. And then there will also be a couple of latrines as well. And here's Sister Bianca with some of the children standing in front, and she's so happy, and she expressed her just sincere gratitude to everybody that supports Sudan Relief Fund for helping her have a home for these children. We also had the opportunity to stop by the HIV support program in Nzara, and this is for children who have either lost their parents to HIV or have HIV themselves. And they greeted us just with joy and song and dance, and it was tough for me to see and think about these poor children who have unfortunately been afflicted with something with HIV that was no fault of their own. And yet, that's just going to be their reality moving forward. However, thanks to the support program, they have medicine, they have care, shelter, they have food and education, clean water. And so it was wonderful to be able to spend some time with them. We spent a couple of hours over in the HIV support program. And before we departed, we stopped quickly at the St. Teresa Hospital as well. And this is a large facility, one of the only hospitals in Western Equatoria. And there, Sudan Relief Fund has constructed a blood bank, a new surgical ward, as well as an eye clinic. And I had the chance to stop by the eye clinic and peek in as a patient was being seen by the doctor there. And since this eye clinic opened in November, I believe, of 2021, it has served thousands of patients and has restored sight, and for so many has helped resolve cataracts for so many. And so it's really a lifesaver for a large portion of the population in Western Equatoria. So from there, we went to WOW, which again, you can see here in the northwest part of South Sudan. And in WOW, I first encountered the Franciscan sisters. This is Sister Lucy and Sister Josephine, and they are rock stars. They are doing such incredible work here in WOW, and which is the second most populated city in South Sudan. So there's large amount of need there as well. And here in WOW, the sisters took us to the Agak leper colony, where they provide food and non-food items for the lepers here in Agak. And Sudan Relief Fund supports the work of the sisters and the work happening at the leper colony. And again, another example where folks that have so little and have suffered so much in their life are greeting us with smiles and gratitude. It is extremely humbling to be able to go to the leper colony with the sisters. This here is a new school building that was constructed as of April of this year. And so I was excited to be able to see the finished product. The St. Thomas Agak School in WOW. Previously, a lot of these schools were just conducting their classrooms outside underneath a tree. They had no building. And so it was not safe, it was not sanitary, and it was not a conducive learning environment for the children. And so this new classroom building, it looks meager, but it will go so far in providing a secure environment for the children there. And here they are in the classroom. This is a kindergarten class. And as you can see, they pack it full, but they're so excited to be in this new facility. And our final place that we went to on this trip, so we've covered a lot of ground here. I told you about our visit with the bishop and seeing the refugees in Malakal. We went to Rumbek, where we saw a leper colony and the Missionary Sisters of Charity. We went out here west, where we saw clean water projects. We saw refugee camps, vocational training, HIV support program. We went to Wow, where we saw the Agak leper colony, a new school building. And our final location that we went to on this trip was all the way up here across the border in North Sudan in the Nuba Mountains. So to get there, we had to fly to this dot here, Yida, and then drive on a good day when conditions are all right. It's about 12 to 13 hours. And that's about what it took us. We were fortunate to have good conditions driving up. And it's a long drive. It's not an easy drive. It's not a safe drive, but we had protection, and we were very fortunate to be able to make pretty good time up to the Nuba Mountains. And our goal there was to visit the Mother of Mercy Hospital, which is run by Dr. Tom Katina, an American doctor who's been serving in Sudan for about 15 years. And the Mother of Mercy Hospital is the only hospital in the Nuba Mountains. And so it's the only hospital for about 1.3 million people. And Dr. Tom is the only surgeon at the hospital. And so he has labored for years as the only surgeon at the only hospital for a region of 1 million people. And Sudan Relief Fund has been a partner at this hospital with him for many years now. And we provide nearly all the medicine used at the Mother of Mercy Hospital. And so we set off with our team here, Fred, Dave. This is actually an American doctor as well, and an SRF donor, Dr. Lewis, who volunteers at the hospital as well. And we all traveled in our little plane up to the Nuba Mountains. This here is the border of South Sudan and North Sudan. I don't know if you can tell in this photo, but it is quite literally just a rope. And it's under armed guard. They're out of frame here, the armed guards. But it's certainly a little unsettling. It's an area where there's no rule of law. It's pretty much anything goes out here in this part of South Sudan and Sudan, and it's pretty unsafe. And it's not uncommon as we were driving to see, oh, there's a guy on a camel with a 50 caliber machine gun. It's eye-opening, to say the least, to be in this part of the world. And you get a sense of the danger, too, that Dr. Tom has inserted himself into and has worked amidst for the last decade and a half. And it's remarkable. I've got the easy job. I go for a couple of weeks, I see the projects, and then I come back here to the US. But Dr. Tom has labored in these incredibly harsh and violent conditions for a decade and a half now. And so we're just so happy to partner with him, and we're so pleased at the work that he's doing at the hospital. And so as you drive up, the landscape is different. You may have seen in some of the photos earlier in Western Equatoria, a little more dense, a little more jungly. But as you get into the Nuba Mountains, it's much more arid, deserty. It's hot. It's about 115 degrees, no AC, much like akin to, the American Southwest, just extremely hot. We finally made it to the hospital. And there you can see here, this is the facility, an aerial view of the facility. And you can tell there's pretty much nothing out here. It's just this. And as Tom has told us, this being the only hospital in this region, it's not uncommon for people to walk hundreds of miles. He even told me that he heard a story of someone that had walked from Egypt to this hospital to get care, because they know that they're going to get incredible care from a physician who cares, who will do his best to care for them. And this is walking into the hospital with Tom. I was able to follow him on his rounds. And here's Tom with Dr. Lewis, the SRF donor and volunteer who traveled with us to the hospital. Here's Tom on his rounds, caring for a little premature baby here. And one of the things that stood out to me as I followed Tom around on his rounds, I told you guys that he's the only doctor and the only physician in an area of about 1.3 million people. But he wants to change that, and so he's training people there. and people, there's a crowd of about 6 to 7 trainees walking around with him, and he's trying to get enough people up to speed to where he'll have more help at the hospital. And so as he's doing his rounds, he's not only caring for the sick, diagnosing problems, prescribing treatment, he's also training and teaching other future doctors around him. And so I was struck by his calmness, his sense of presence. I mean, doing this every day for 365 days a year for 15 years in this heat, in these conditions, for me, it wore on me in a single day. And so the idea that he's been able to do this for this long, it's just remarkable. And of course, he attributes it to his faith. And he said that there would be no other way that I'd be able to serve the people for this long if it weren't for my faith. And I was struck by just the way in which he was able to diagnose, prescribe, still have a sense of presence, and move extremely quick. He saw in just a day probably 600 patients, and I could hardly keep up. Here's actually some of those doctors that he was training around him as well. You can see they follow him as he was making his rounds. It's a very cramped hospital. People line the halls. People are stuffed in each room. Oftentimes there's 2 to 3 people per bed. And I said, as I said, many of them are walking hundreds of miles to be at this hospital just to get care from Dr. Tom and the staff here at Mother of Mercy. And outside even, there's people even on the ground outside on the other side of this photo, where they're actually outside sleeping on the ground. These patients were lucky enough to get a bed, oftentimes because they're in the worst shape. And Tom just, with precision, moves from person to person to person without ceasing. This is actually the inside of a new children's ward and maternity ward that we have helped construct, which is completed and really impressive and will be in use here very soon. This is a shipment of medicine that we were so excited to see arrive while we were actually there at the hospital. It was so cool to see boxes and boxes of medicine arrive. It takes a long while for this medicine to get there. And so to have it arrive while we were there, it was really cool. And, this is medicine that you all, as Sudan Relief Fund donors and partners, are helping provide. As I said, most of the medicine at Mother of Mercy Hospital is directly provided by Sudan Relief Fund. So it was a full circle moment to get to actually see the medicine there in person being delivered. This is a physician. This is Tom, of course, and then actually one of the physicians that he's training as well, Philip, who is actually just returning from school in Uganda, medical school. And so he was actually he returned, I think it was 2 or 3 days before we arrived. And he's also going to be working at the hospital alongside Tom, providing some support. An ultrasound machine that was purchased by Sudan Relief Fund that is getting a lot of use for sure. He sat there and with some of the women there using the ultrasound machine for a long time, just seeing woman after woman. And so it was wonderful to be able to see that in use as well. This is the inside of a new surgical ward. It's not much to look at right now, but it's almost completed. And they just have, I think, some painting to do. The current surgical ward at Mother of Mercy Hospital is very small. And so this operating theater is going to provide a lot more space for Tom and his staff. And they are very excited to use this here very soon. This here is Tom, of course, on the right. You've got Dr. Lewis, the SRF donor and volunteer, on the left. And then that is actually Tom's adopted son, Francis, who is standing there with Dr. Lewis. And I had the opportunity to just visit with Tom as well. He doesn't take much time to just sit, but I was able to, in fact, right here, even as we were sitting about to eat, he was still working. And it's not uncommon for him to get called in the night 2 to 3 times. And so he's working pretty much 24 hours a day, every day of the week, every day of the year. And he just said, if it wasn't for my faith, I couldn't do it, but this is what my calling is. And he's the man for the job. It's really incredible to be able to watch firsthand. At times, it felt like I was watching a miracle almost in front of me in real time, seeing the way in which he worked. And here's me with Dr. Lewis and Dr. Tom right before we all left. And as we were departing, we saw this, which is this is a medical storehouse here in the background, and in the foreground, a bomb that didn't go off, that probably was dropped in the last couple of years. And it's just a stark reminder of life in this part of the world, how harsh it is, and the realities of war for so many. And again, as someone that just comes in and is only there for a few weeks, I see it, but to have this evidence, physical evidence like this, as in a photo, I return to it and look at it because it was a reminder of, even though I'm back here in the US now and only spent a few weeks in South Sudan this year, daily life for folks there is like this. It's unsure of your safety. It's unsure of where you're going to get your daily needs. And so it was seeing this bombshell in the ground was a reminder of that for me as well. And then inside that storehouse, inside that building right there, is a bunch of medicine that has been recently delivered and is going to be going to the hospital and other places across the Nuba Mountains. And so again, it was really cool to see full circle medicine that you all, as our donors and supporters and partners, have helped purchase, going up to the Nuba Mountains and actually being able to see it there in person was really special. And so thank you. I know I've taken about 45 minutes here, and so hopefully you all felt this was informative, and you felt that you get a little bit more of an insight into the work that Sudan Relief Fund does, the work that you're helping support. And I want to express our sincere thanks to you all for your continued partnership with our mission. All this work that I was able to see firsthand in person is only made possible because of you all. So I am so thankful for you. And for those, I see some familiar names in here, but for those that I don't know, if you want to reach out to me directly, if you have any other questions, please, I'll leave my contact info up here for a minute as we transition into questions. But please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. I'd love to hear from you if you want any of these photos, even if you'd like some of them for yourself or other photos, or you have questions about some of the projects that I discussed. I would love to be able to get in touch with you directly. And so at this point, I did see a couple of questions being asked in the chat here. And so I want to make sure that I address those. Just taking a look here. One of the questions here from Christy is, she asked, how clean is clean water? That's a good question, Christy. That's clean enough. And I think, if you drill about 75 meters down, typically is where you can access the water. Then if you're able to get that far deep, the water that's coming up is clean. And I think the challenge, and one of the things that we impress upon our partners and the local communities, is to take good care of those wells that they've been given. And so I know a lot of the local priests there, a lot of the bishops that we work with, they, even while we were there, were teaching the people how to properly use the well so as to avoid it breaking. And in doing so, you ensure that this water is clean and sustainable for many, many years. And so the water is clean. It's coming from very deep in the ground. And as long as the well is properly maintained and cared for, it should last for a long time. And these projects, and Joshua, thanks for your question as well. These clean water projects, it depends. Some of it depends on where these projects are happening, right? So if it's really remote, it might be a little more expensive than if it was happening in an area that is more populated and easier to get to. Generally, again, without having a specific project in mind, generally the standard borehole that pumps water from the ground and comes out that spigot, just like some of the photos you saw here today, that's around $10,000. And then there are other clean water initiatives and projects that are a little bit more extensive, that are actually submersible and solar powered. And those are about $20,000 to $30,000, depending again on where you put it and how many people it's going to be serving and so forth. So on the low end, a new well, which can serve thousands of people, will cost about $10,000. And the submersible solar-powered pump is about between 20 to 30, again, depending on where it is. So hopefully that provides some clarity for you there. I got another question here that says, it was asking about the language. You know, is there English that's taught? Is English spoken when you're in South Sudan? And it's a good question. And the short answer is yes, English is spoken. It's taught as even as a primary language in high school. English is the national language in South Sudan, and they've done that to try to create some sort of unification. But there's also still Arabic which is primarily from North Sudan, but Arabic is spoken as well in South Sudan, as well as tribal languages. There's about 50 or so odd tribes in South Sudan, and each of those tribes has their own dialect and language. And so English is unifying in that sense. And so there is English taught, and it is the teaching language throughout South Sudan, but oftentimes we might be speaking English to each other, but it seems like we're not talking the same language because the accents are very strong, right? And so sometimes it was like, are we speaking the same language? But we're able to navigate it and speak well enough. And so that doesn't present actually that many issues when you're in South Sudan. Some of them are more remote areas, and it's just tribal languages. And then that's where it's a little bit harder to communicate. I got one question that said, what do you find to be the most rewarding part of my trip? Thanks for that question from Bentley. For me, it's being able to see the finished product for so many of these projects. When I'm here in the US, part of my job as our director of strategic partnerships is to identify projects and successfully implement them. But for me, it's so rewarding to then be able to travel to South Sudan and to actually see them firsthand and interact with the people who are benefiting from them. And so to go to an orphanage where there's a new building being built and to actually see and communicate and converse with the beneficiaries of that orphanage is incredibly rewarding. To be able to go to the water well and see it open and see the people dancing and celebrating the well is incredibly rewarding. To be able to talk with victims of war who are now receiving care and food and shelter because of your partnership, to be able to talk with them firsthand is so rewarding. And so to be able to see in person the implementation of these projects and to interact with the beneficiaries of them is, for me, just an incredible joy, and why I love this work and why I love working with Sudan Relief Fund. And so thank you all for these questions. These were insightful questions. They were illuminating for questions as well, hopefully for the group. And I just want to say thank you to all of you who stuck around this hour. I appreciate you all taking time out of your day to take an interest in Sudan Relief Fund's work, the people of South Sudan and Sudan. You know, this is a part of the world that is like a different planet when you go and visit it. And it's, even for me, who is engaged in this work on a daily basis, it can seem so distant and so far away. And so to have you all take an interest, an active interest, by joining today and expressing, you know, your solidarity with the people of South Sudan just means so much. And so I want to say thank you to you all for joining. And again, please do not hesitate to reach out to me directly if you'd like any more stories, or you just want to talk to me further about any of the projects you heard about today. Email me or give me a call, and I'd love to hear from you. So, and if you're interested in sharing this too, this meeting will be recorded and distributed. And so you should be getting an email sometime over the next couple of days, maybe sometime next week, with this recording. And so if you found this interesting and you want to share it with friends and family, please, of course, feel free to do so as well. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you again for your continued partnership with Sudan Relief Fund. God bless you all. Bye-bye.